Okay, so let's take a look at decimal places and significant figures. They're often confused, but are also often required at the ends of questions where you've done other stuff. And so a knowledge of these is fundamental, really, to enabling you to be able to give answers to a degree of accuracy. So I'm going to take a look at several different numbers and compare the difference when we use decimal places as to when we use significant figures. So the first number I'm going to look at is 4,213. Now, there are no decimal places. It doesn't say 4,213 point something, and so there are no decimal places to round to, which means there is no change in the answer. But if we're asked to round it to significant figures, 3 significant figures, then for significant figures we start to count non-zero digits from the very beginning of the number. So you can see the dots above the 3 significant figures in which we're interested. We discount the last one because we're only interested in 3 of them. However, we must put in its place a placeholder of 0. If we don't do that, then we would move from a number which is in its thousands to a number which is just in the hundreds. So do remember, when you're doing significant figures, if we are going to discount any of the digits, you must put a 0 placeholder in its place. And so the difference you can see, if we round 4,213 to 3 decimal places, it doesn't change, but if we round it to 3 significant figures, it becomes 4,210. Secondly, we're going to look at 23.65. Now, to 1 decimal place, decimal places are counted from after the decimal point. So the first decimal place here is the 6, and the red line shows you that that's the cut-off point. The question is then, does the next digit have any effect on the 6? And the rule here is that if it's 5 or bigger, then yes, it does have an effect. If it's 4 or less, it has no effect. And the effect it has, if it's big enough, is to turn the previous digit into 1 higher. So you can see that 23.65 to 1 decimal place becomes 23.7. Now if we look at it to 1 significant figure, you can see I've put a dot above the significant figure. It's the 2. Bearing in mind that we're starting off with 23, so we've got to be in the tens. So we need to put a placeholder in place of the 3 and the 6 and the 5, just to make sure. And we end up with 20.00. Now generally speaking, you would not include those 2 zeros after the decimal place, and the answer would simply be 20. So to 1 decimal place, 23.65 is 23.7, and to 1 significant figure, it's 20. Third one I'm going to look at then is 0.0465. And I want it to 2 decimal places to start off with. So I count those 2 after the decimal point, put my marker line in to see where I am. The only number I want to consider is the one immediately after that marker line, so that's the 6. So I ignore the 5. That's gone. It's done with. Question again, as it was here, is does the 6 affect the 4? The answer is yes. It turns it into a 5. And so 0.0465 to 2 decimal places is 0.05. Now for significant figures, we must count from the beginning of the number, but we must ignore what we call leading zeros. So we don't start counting significance until we reach the first non-zero digit. And in this case, that's the 4. So I've put dots over the 2 significant figures. and that's the cut-off point. And the question is, does the next digit affect the previous one? And the answer is yes, it does. And so that 6 becomes a 7. And so to two significant figures, it's 0.047. Okay. Let's look at a few more. Get that lined up so you can see it. So we've got 0.009231 here, and we're going to look at it to 3 decimal places and 3 significant figures. So to 3 decimal places we would count 1, 2, 3 after the decimal point, put in your marker, ignore everything except the number immediately after the marker, so ignore the 3 and the 1, just look at the 2. Does it have an effect on the 9? No, it's too small. And so to 3 decimal places we have 0.009. 3 significant figures. Remember, we don't start counting significant figures until we hit the first non-zero digit. In this case that's the 9. Count 3 of them. 1, 2, 3. Ignore, but put a placeholder in. This 1 after the cut-off point isn't big enough to affect the 3, and so to 3 significant figures we have 0.00923. And in that case again you would ignore the final placeholder because it's a decimal. Next one then, we will look at 0.00507 to 3 decimal places. 1, 2, 3, cut-off point. Ignore everything except the number straight after the cut-off point. In this case that's 0. Does the 0 affect the 5? No. And so to 3 decimal places it's 0.005. To 3 significant figures, don't count the zeros, start counting at the first non-zero, but do include any other zeros that come after it. So 1, 2, 3, cut-off point. Looking at the 7, does it affect that 0? Yes, it does. It turns it into a 1. So to 3 significant figures we have 0.00501. 43.89 to 1 decimal place. There it is. 1 decimal place is the 8. Cut-off point. Does the 9 affect the 8? Yes, it does. It turns it into a 9. So 43.9. To 1 significant figure, well, start counting at the front of the number. There it is, the dot over the first significant figure. Ignore the others, but do put your 0 placeholders in so that we keep the size of the number correct. And again, you wouldn't need to write these 2 zeros after the decimal point. It would simply be 40. Okay, we've got one last one to look at then, which is 0.07008. And we want this to 2 decimal places. 1, 2, cut-off point. Ignore these 2, just look at the 0. Does it affect the 7? No. So to 2 decimal places, 0.07. 2 significant figures. Don't count the leading zeros, count the first non-zero digit, but do count any zeros after that. So 1, 2. Cut-off point. Ignore the 8. Does the 0 affect that 0? No, it doesn't. So we would end up with 0.070, and of course we would ignore the final 0. So it would be 0.07.